Jason Hawes and the Atlantic Paranormal Society have visited Maine several times for investigations, most famously at Fort Knox in Prospect. But years before their SyFy Channel show Ghost Hunters aired its first episode, Jason and the team investigated a home in Skowhegan. The house belonged to Gary and Diane Eshelman, who lived there with their 2 daughters, their son and his girlfriend. The sprawling 1800s home had plenty of room for everyone, and all went well until the paranormal activity began. According to Hawes, the family experienced disturbances at all hours, but especially at night. They heard footsteps, the sound of children crying, and other noises, whose sources they couldn't identify. They had been pushed from behind by forces they couldn't see. Small objects had levitated and struck some members of the family. On one occasion, Robert, the son, had felt scratching sensations in the areas of his groin and chest. When he checked the affected areas, he discovered long, red scratch marks in his skin. The marks had gone away since then, but his fear of what made them seemed to have remained with him. The team, Jason, Grant Wilson, Keith Johnson, Ed Baines, Andy Andrews, among others, packed up their gear and made the long trek from Rhode Island to Maine. By unfortunate chance, they were about to drive headfirst into a blizzard. Hours later, and through several inches of snow, the team finally arrived at the sprawling 26-room home in Skowhegan. Though dazed from the journey, they were relieved to have made it unharmed. The Eshelman family was waiting to greet them at the door, offering warm accommodations to the investigators. After introductions and a chance to shake off the chill, the team began unloading their gear and devised a strategy to investigate the massive residence. The team set up their gear in the rooms and areas of the house where the family had reported the most activity. Once everything was in place, they turned off the lights and got started. To their surprise, the activity began almost immediately. Doors slammed in our faces without any rational explanation, Jason shared. A couple of our investigators felt something hot against their skin and moments later found scratches there. They had also heard unsettling growls from somewhere within the house. Despite looking everywhere, the team could not determine the source. We experienced one temperature change after another, Jason continued, all throughout the house. First, we would record 68 degrees, then it would rise to 90 degrees, and afterward, it would plummet to 40 degrees. The changes were drastic, and therefore unlikely to have natural causes. The team also reported foul odors that, like the growls, were elusive and without any identifiable source. Jason added, we also found ourselves plagued by energy surges, our EMF meters jumping all over the place. There was no natural explanation for the activity as far as we could tell. That was night 1. The second evening brought even more intriguing experiences. At one point, Jason and Grant were walking through the living room when the friends were suddenly hit by something. Looking down at the floor, Jason recalled, we saw a couple of remote controls lying at our feet. We were sure they hadn't been there the last time we passed through the room. Soon after, noises were heard coming from the barn. The team set out to investigate the source, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Just as they were about to leave the barn, the sounds began again, this time louder. Suddenly, something whizzed by them as if an object had been thrown. Jason later shared, they had weight to them, too, judging by the way they crashed against the walls. They turned out to be wooden boards. We didn't know if whatever threw them had intended to hit us with them, but if they had hit us, they would definitely have done some damage. But that wasn't the most harrowing experience. Later that night, as Jason and Grant investigated the bedrooms, a shadowy humanoid figure appeared before them, seemingly emerging out of thin air. It was roughly the size of a man, Jason said, and it didn't seem daunted by us in the least. Only when we got close enough to touch it did it fade away, leaving us standing by ourselves in the hallway. The team also caught some disturbing EVPs. One declared, "Go to hell," and another, "Come to hell." After all they experienced, they concluded the house was haunted by a negative force, and they were not going to leave the Eshelmans with a mean-spirited ghost. So the task of cleansing the home fell to team member Keith Johnson. Going from room to room, Jason explained, Keith recited the blessings he had brought with him, methodically cutting off the entity from one part of the house after another. Keith was meticulous and methodical. It was important to have a plan, Jason continued, because without one the entity could find a place to hole up and reassert itself at a later date. In conducting our investigation, we hadn't found it necessary to enter all 26 rooms in the house, but we had to do so now. Keith had his work cut out for him as never before. After all, cleansing a place isn't just a matter of saying words out of a book. There's a struggle involved, and it can wear a man out even when he's dealing with just 6 or 7 rooms. Keith had finally worked his way through every room except for 2, the kitchen and the attic. The kitchen posed no challenge, but the attic was a different story. Its poor condition made it inaccessible. It was unable to support a person's weight. The only way to access it was through an outside window, and the blizzard was still raging. Unfortunately, it was pretty high up, Jason said. To make use of it, someone would have to climb up the side of the house. In good weather, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. In a raging blizzard, that was another story. And even if we had access to the window, we could only sprinkle holy water on the near end. The rest of the attic would go without, and therefore continue to serve as a safe harbor for the negative entity. Unless, of course, we found a way to shoot the holy water across the attic to the other side. That's when Grant had an idea. With preparations complete, Jason elected himself to climb the ladder to the attic window, unwilling to put anyone else in such a precarious situation. Slowly, he made his way up, carefully gripping the ladder with one hand and the holy water's delivery system in the other. When he got to the window, it opened easily for him. He steadied himself, took aim, and squeezed the trigger on the super soaker that Mr. Eshelman had dug up, an old toy belonging to his son. I shot a stream of water across the attic, Jason recalled. At the same time, I could hear Keith on the ground below, speaking his blessings into the wind. His voice sounded far away, muted by the falling snow. Another shot of water, another blessing. Another shot, another blessing, and so on. I'm sure Keith could have kept going for a long time. He had so many blessings stored in his head. But the super soaker was out of water. With that, Jason headed back down. After the ordeal outside, the team returned to the warmth of the kitchen. It was the final room to be cleansed, but it also served as a much-needed warming station from the storm. Everyone huddled around, doing their best to shake off the cold. Once they were ready, Keith got back to work. Almost immediately, the entity made itself known. Each blessing he spoke got a reaction in the form of a growl, Jason said, as if a wild animal had snuck into the house and was trying to scare us out of it. Finally, the growling stopped. Scattered around the Eshelman's kitchen, we looked at each other hopefully. But there was one last thing that had to take place before we knew the cleansing had been effective. On cue, Keith asked for a sign of the entity's departure. For a moment, nothing happened, Jason started. Then the birdcage behind me rattled, as if it were going to shake itself apart. Only for a couple of seconds, of course, though it seemed like much longer. After that, the kitchen was still again. Exhausted and relieved, the team rested for a few hours before departing. The Eshelman family were grateful for the team's hard work, and, according to Jason, the house has remained inactive.